So excited to have everyone back on the Mastering Counseling podcast. I'm very excited today to have someone with a wealth of knowledge and experience, 47 years in this field, who has the practice Go Beyond Talk Therapy, Philip DeLuca, who is a social worker and licensed and out of North Carolina. Welcome to the show today.
Well, thank you for having me, Becky. Thank you. Glad to be here. Excited to be here.
Yes. Well, I am excited to hear about your strategies, methods, and plans. So we will get right into it. You have something that's a little bit outside the box, but is working for a lot of people. The untalk, untherapy approach. So tell us what you are doing.
Well, basically, I developed a new communication model. When I got out of school, graduate school in '77, I was practicing conventional communication models, which, as you're aware of, are called express yourself and talk it through. Never go to bed mad at each other. Tell them how you feel. You're entitled to your anger. Get it out. Repressed anger kills, and so on. Well, what I discovered right out of the gate was it seemed to be making things worse. So people were coming in arguing even more. So I was like, something's wrong here. So I spent the next 40 years trying to figure out why that doesn't work, and even more important, coming up with an alternative that does work. So I put together my untherapy approach, and actually I renamed it to Stop Talking and Start Communicating, which sums up how best to communicate. Stop talking when you are upset. There's the key.
Mm-hmm.
Conventional models encourage a discussion, working it through when you're upset. And now we know from the latest mind-body science is that we're not wired that way. And if you do that, the science says at best it will have no effect, but usually it will make the situation significantly worse. In some cases, unresolvable that could have been resolved. So I've been perfecting that over the last 40 years and getting really good results with people that have used conventional stuff and are at the point of getting divorced or separating and turning it around like on the spot.
Wow.
So, yeah. So I'm happy to share that with your audience, and maybe we can rescue some relationships out there.
That would be great. I'm all about relationships being restored. Let's talk about, since you got into this in the late 70s, let's kind of talk about the timeline of the process. And, did you start out with a group? Did you, the whole kind of path of your career and where you've come now?
Yeah, I was working in a nonprofit agency and just seeing couple after couple, and things were not gelling. So I came out with a book in '96 called The Solar Partner, Repairing Your Relationship. And one of the articles in there was on the fight or flight response, kind of a more elementary understanding of it and applying it. And then after that kind of went its way, then I said, let me zoom in on this chapter, Stopping Reactivity, which was chapter 3 in that book. And also at the same time, I was having some health problems, autoimmune diseases. So I started researching what's going on with that. And then I discovered the biology of disease, which is inflammation, is the same exact process that occurs when we get upset. And so I combined the two and came up with a way that cools a relationship, throttles back conflict, makes people be able to get to a place where they can talk through stuff instead of bouncing off the same wall over and over. And at the same time, improve their health, because it's all related. Stress is a killer on people's health. Premature aging, 9 to 17 years, chronic, people think get anger off. Here's an interesting statistic I came across. Get in touch with your anger and get it out. The problem is episodic anger outbursts increase heart attack and stroke risk 500% for 2 hours afterwards. Well, I don't know about you, but I'd like to know that little detail. Get your anger out and call the Undertaker. For me, I'm funny that way. I'd like to know about little details like that. And then, of course, chronic argument creates chronic stress. I mean, the statistics are horrendous. Cancer risk goes up 3,000% over time. Heart attack and stroke risk goes up 2,000%, increases blood pressure. 72% of all doctor visits are stress related. Autoimmune, if you've noticed when you're under high stress, you lose your memory, you can't think. So contributes to dementia, you name it. It's got its finger in everything. So conventional approaches, talk it through and express yourself, they actually encourage more inflammation in the body and more sickness. And that's an obvious thing, because you talk to anybody who's in a chronic argument situation and they'll have a whole list of physical problems. I can't sleep. I got stomach aches. I got headaches. My rashes have come back, whatever it is. It's a huge list. So, I call conventional communication, express yourself approaches the gift that keeps on giving. It's a personal peace out of relationships, kills caring and love, kills sex life, ruins communication, and destroys their health. So it's the gift that keeps on giving. You keep using it, and it keeps on giving back on every level. It takes no prisoners.
Yeah.
And here's the sad part. People are using that. Counselors are using it, books, shows. Nobody's really questioned that whole model. And as a result, it's causing a lot of couples to break up, relationships to be more chaotic than they need to be. And these situations, they don't have to break up if they just had an approach that talked to how we are built, not go against our grain. It's kind of like if you have a rash or something and you're using an antifungal and it doesn't go away, then you find out, oh, it's a bacteria that's causing this. Let me put it on an antibiotic right away. It'll go away within a week or two. So it's the same kind of thing. Conventional models are out of phase with the way we're wired and the way we're wired inside of us and the way we're wired for relationships. So it doesn't help the situation. And if you hit on the core issue of how we're wired, you could eliminate argument right out of the gate, like as soon as you apply it. So that's the nice news. You can drop back all that chaos that I talked about earlier, that chronic arguing is talking about.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing the biology into it. And we know so many people in our country struggling with many issues of stress and everything. And so I'm clearly it's not helping the relationships and all that as well. So let's talk about, just say, a couple's been in more traditional modes of counseling, let's say 3 years, they're frustrated. Are the counselors then referring them out to you? Are you word of mouth? How are they getting to you? And then when they are in your office or online, what does those sessions look like?
Yeah, counselors really haven't bought into my approach. They're still locked into the talking through approach that came out of the 70s. That was developed during the Woodstock era, 68. Sorry about that. Let me turn that off. I was in New York City at the time, and I remember Woodstock, and I didn't go up there because the state troopers were saying, hey, the thruway is closed, don't come up. But it was 68, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I mean, let it all hang out was the motto. People want to have sex on your front lawn, go ahead. You're so stoned, who cares? And it's none of their business. I mean, people were skinny dipping in the community pools. They were streaking across the neighborhood naked, usually the women. And it was a chaotic time. So they came at this approach, let it all hang out, express yourself. There was never any science to support that. And it just caught on, and everybody built on that. And nobody really challenged it. So getting back to what you were saying was, usually I find people find me because they're like, I've been in counseling, we're not getting anywhere, we're wasting our time, seems to be getting worse. And they'll get online and they'll see something on my website that says an alternative to conventional approaches. And then they'll see my PowerPoint I put out web on my website called Stop Your Fighting Tonight. And so
I saw that. Yeah.
They'll like the material. So that's how I get people to come in.
Okay.
And the approach basically says, it focuses on the fight or flight response. So there's two parts of the brain I'd like to focus on. There's the front brain, cerebral cortex, thinking brain, music, love, spirituality. That's our connecting brain, logic. And then we have our back brain, which we share with the lower life forms, our amygdala. If you put your fingers between your two ears, it's right there. Fight or flight response, dark, bleak, doom, gloom, catastrophic, worst case scenario. So what happens when we get upset, and that's a survival brain, that's a chaos brain, that's a conflict seeking chaotic brain. All right, that's really important. Connect brain, destroy brain. Okay. So what happens is, in between those two brains is a hypothalamus, which is like a switching unit. So if you think about it, when you're starting to get upset, we now know that the body starts rerouting, starts engorging the back of the brain with blood, right? Potential threat, be on alert, could be eaten by a bear. But it takes the blood from the front of the brain. So what happens is the front brain decreases in functioning, and the back brain comes alive. And at some point, if you ever been upset and heard yourself having this internal dialogue, stay calm. No, I don't want to stay calm. There's a bunch of crap. I'm not going to take this. That's actually two parts of the brain having a dialogue, and you can hear it. Now, both of those brains are connected through the autonomic nervous system to through 90% of our organs. So one jacks us up. It's a threat. The other one calms us down afterwards. Okay. Oh, that was a close one. So if you ever been upset and heard and had that dialogue, and then after a while, what's called amygdala, that's you're like still in the front brain control. So stay in control. You're going to lose your job. You're going to do something you're going to regret. You don't want to do that. And then as the stress keeps rising, the hypothalamus keeps switching the blood from the front to the back brain. And then you go from 51 to 49 to 51-49 up to 75-25. So basically, front brain falls asleep, and now you're in back brain, and you're into a fight or flight mode. And I call that a crocodile brain because we act like crocodiles. No difference. Survival alone. So a minute ago, you were looking forward to going to dinner with them, and now that you've been hijacked and you're pumped up, they are the dinner. So things switch radically, and now we're looking to engage in conflict. So we're volatile, irrational, we bring up past stuff. There's no rhyme or reason to what we say or do. But so here's where conventional approaches come in. Get in touch with your anger. Stay in touch with it. You're entitled to it. Don't go to bed mad at each other. So what they're doing is they're encouraging more conflict rather than saying, wait a minute, calm down, and then re-engage. That's why I'm saying stop talking and start communicating, because you're not communicating effectively when you're this is a worst case scenario, dark, bleak, catastrophic you versus me mentality. So it's not a connecting brain, it's a destroying brain. And if you notice, when people are upset, they're always got to be right. They're never wrong. They have to have the last word because it's a domination brain. And it's got, unfortunately, 99% of the time, it gets activated when it shouldn't be. So now you think you're in a combat place when you're not. The person still is the same person in front of you that you loved 5 minutes ago. But now that you're angry, you see them as the enemy out to hurt you. And they're doing it on purpose. And I've got to hurt you back. If I go down, I'm taking you with me. So conventional approaches encourage that. So we'll talk it through. So they get more angry. So they get more wired for this. And so there's another part to this. It's called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity says we now know we shape our brain with our thoughts. The brain, neuroplasticity, the brain is flexible. It's plastic. We shape it with our thought. It's a muscle. If you use it, it grows. And if you don't, it shrinks. Okay. So what does that mean? What that means is, over time, if you're staying in touch with your anger, you're wiring your back brain for more anger. It's becoming hypersensitive. The slightest thing sets you off. You've got triggers going off all over the place. Arguments get more frequent. They get more intense. Recovery is becoming increasingly incomplete. You haven't gotten over the last 5 arguments. Now you get hit with another one. So the caring, here's caring, you drop down with an argument, slowly recover, you get hit with another one, and then another one, and then eventually you get into what I call is the dead zone. this sucks caring, love, joy, peace, health out of relationship. So you have no caring left in that dead zone, and you just move on. Because even if you fix it, then it doesn't matter because I don't like you anymore. I don't love you. So why bother? So we now know the more we stay in touch with our anger, the more we wire ourselves for more anger. And the other part of that is another part of that, the sister science that has epigenetics. Epigenetics, we now know that there's 52,000 genes in our body, and we can each cell can switch on or off up to 28. Some are pro-inflammatory, and some are anti-inflammatory. Some release endorphins and calm us down, and some release cortisol and their ilk and jack us up. Well, how does the cell know whether we're in a peaceful, relaxing place on the beach or we're in a combat area and I need to release the cortisol? Well, what they do is every cell in our body now we know is listening to our brain, which is forming around our thoughts. So if we're staying in touch with our anger, the cells think we're in this combat mode constantly, and they're switching on these chronic stress hormones, which basically cook our insides over time. So people that hold on and don't forgive and resent are really taking a poison every day. It's like, to punish you, I'm going to drink this arsenic every day in order to punish you. But they're wiring their body and their brain for more conflict, more negativity, more trauma, and more toxicity. So, basically what I'm saying is you get caught up in this downward spiral. You feel bad, you're upset, you talk it through at the moment, because God forbid you ever want to go to bed mad at each other. That's the serious sin. You don't want to do that. So you talk it through. You don't sleep that night because you're upset. The next day you have these long text wars, and then you finish it that night. And then after 3 days, you finally fall asleep because you call a truce and you're so exhausted. So you finally do fall asleep. But there's this huge debris out there, stuff that was said, the past that was brought up, toxic words, gestures that were made. So that's a long recovery process. And before you get back recovered from that, you get hit with another one, because what it does is anger is progressive. So it's like a snowball rolling down a hill. It gets quicker, triggers get quicker, they're more intense, the arguments, recovery is increasingly incomplete, and it starts feeding on itself. You're not over the last argument when you get triggered with another one, so you put it out there, you get, and while this is going on, the brain is saying, hey, I don't need the front brain involvement anymore. Love, caring, understanding, self-control, responsibility, and accounting. But I need more back brain. Be on alert. You never know when they're going to attack you. You got to attack back. So what we do is the brain gets increasingly lopsided. And it's called that amygdala hijack occurs. If you've ever been upset, and you're watching your behaviors, or these negative behaviors you're doing, and you can't stop it. People will say, well, I know when I'm there, because it's like words are coming out of my mouth, but I can't control them. It's like I'm watching a film of my life, but I can't stop it. That's the amygdala, back brain, reptilian brain, crocodile brain, hijack, where it takes over. And that thing becomes, as that grows, so this turns into, over time, we train it to turn into the Terminator, and front brain turns into Pee Wee Herman. So after a while, you're stuck in there. The slightest thing sets you off. You're always defensive. You're always attacking. You're always bringing up past stuff, and you can't stop yourself. And while the two of them are feeding on each other in that regard, the brain is wiring around even more of that. And so, like a snowball, it's on a self-feeding, accelerating course. And then it becomes, if we talk about it, we get into it. And if we don't talk about it, we still go mad at each other and get into an argument. So it becomes, they get to a lose-lose situation. And everything they try, let's talk it through, let's make these rules, active listening, I won't cut you off, I won't bring up the past. Well, that's really easy when you're in your front brain in control. But when we get hijacked, front brain shuts down. We lose up to 75% of the blood flow. It's like a leg that falls asleep. You can't walk on it. So
Yeah.
you can't use those rules. So they go out the window. We do the very things we say we weren't going to do. We get calmer afterwards. Front brain clicks back on. Now you have regrets and guilt and shame. And okay, this time we're going to do better. They get upset. It repeats. They get hijacked again. And now they get into a feeling of hopelessness. Everything we do, it just makes it worse. We go to a counselor. They say, talk it through. We talk it through. It gets worse. We read a book. It says to do that. The problem is that approach is faulty. It's just feeding the very it becomes part of the problem. So that when they're upset, the more the worse it gets. So they feel hopeless. Everything we try doesn't work. We must be in a failure. And that increases stress, which increases back brain involvement. So everything they do from that point forward just accelerates the tumble. And it can happen real quick. People will say, we were doing good for years, and in the last 3 months, it's been a living hell. So, my approach, basically, what I did was I found out what the science was, why conventional approaches don't work, and then I came up with what do you do in lieu of that? And that's what I perfected clinically over the last 30 years or so of, okay, let me try this. Okay, I need a little more of this. I need a little more of this. And I put it together in a very concrete 5-step program to help people, because when they're going through this, there's so much emotional confusion and debris going on. You have to make it very simple, very clear, break it down into little steps and walk them through that. And then when you put it all together, they got it. And they're in a much better place.
Wow. Yes, I love I've heard that, many times the fight or flight, the front brain, back brain. But I feel like that had so much detail and was helpful, especially with the blood flow. I feel like we don't hear those stats as much. I will tell you, I'm a school counselor at an elementary, and
okay.
we are there. Unfortunately, we have so many children who have been using the back brain so many times because of trauma and such devastating situations. I will tell you, though, that more and more educators are understanding, especially we're not going to communicate when there's no logic, like showing them visuals, showing them how to calm down their feelings, and then later addressing. So some of those things are getting out, but
well, let me talk to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm starting to see people are figuring out. They haven't figured out conventional approaches don't work to the full extent. So I am seeing people who are getting that information. Counselors, clients are coming in, and they're saying, "Yeah, I went to the counselor, and either an individual counselor or conjoint sessions, and they weren't giving them that stuff to calm down, but they're not giving them the whole picture." So the problem is, people are having a tough time implementing that, is what I'm saying. They're putting together little pieces here, so they figured out this doesn't work engaging people when you're upset. But you need the full picture in order to get this thing, wrestle it to the ground, and they still don't have that. And that's where my approach kind of excels. Because one of my steps, step 5, is how to navigate through provocation. Most people, if the other party won't cooperate, most counselors will tell you, well, we can't do anything till they're cooperative. Well, that's 50% of the population. And I've had a problem with that right out of graduate school. I just write them off. When they're ready to deal with this, then come back in. And I wasn't happy with that. So I developed an approach that deals with what do you do about that when you have somebody who's looking to provoke an argument, and everything you try, they just twist, distort, try to argue with you. What's the reason for that, and how do you short circuit that? So that's one piece. The other one is, one of the things I discovered is when people are dying in this conflict scenario, which is horrendous. If you ever been through a divorce, I mean, the reason I wanted to go into marriage counseling is because when a marriage or relationship breaks up, the ripple effect is enormous. I mean, you have the trauma effect on the children. You have people are poorer afterwards. You have people turning to alcohol, depression, promiscuous sex. Um, you have the effect on the families. You have the finances that have to get breaking up. So uh, I figured I can prevent all those ripples for every relationship I can keep together, every marriage. And that's for me a lot of bang for the buck. Somebody didn't commit suicide, somebody didn't turn to alcohol, somebody didn't
Right.
turn to porn, somebody didn't have promiscuous sex and get into another bad relationship. The kids aren't traumatized. The extended family doesn't have to deal with whose side, who's right, who's wrong, and all that kind of stuff. Affairs didn't happen and all that stuff. So that's why I like doing this
Yeah.
when I help people prevent that from happening. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a real rush for me.
Yeah.
Sense
Well,
of
I
something.
appreciate it. Although any families that can stay intact, it's huge. It is it is amazing the ripple effect for sure. Um Now it looked like on your website you do service more than just couples, or are you only focusing on couples at this point? Maybe teenagers, or where are you at with who you're
Yeah,
servicing?
I'm doing mainly all my stuff now is pretty much relationship stuff.
Okay.
Um, I don't do teenagers. I used to do kids a lot. I mean, I'm 72 now and almost. And the younger generation is like they're from another planet. I'm like, what what is going on here? This is like an alien is sitting in front of me. So
Oh yeah.
I can't comprehend all those issues. I got enough dealing with marriages because, there's so much more difficult to work out stuff in marriages. There's so many
Hmm.
things pulling people apart. I
Hmm.
describe it in a relationship, unless you get proactive with it, you're not going to make it. Why? It's like a current. Think of this. You got a river flowing downstream and there's a cliff over the end. If you just get in and float, it'll take you. If you swim across to the other side, you may make it or you may not because the current's pulling you down. So what do you have to do to make it? If you swim against the current, it'll pull you down, but you're making progress against it, so you're more likely to make it. So what does that translate into practical application? There's so much stuff pulling people apart. When I was growing up, you had one TV, three stations in the middle of the room, and you looked at TV together. Now you have a TV in this room, a TV over here, 150 stations. You have this electronic thing that's making me crazy. Everybody's on their phone, either Facebook or playing video games. So you're in a restaurant. You used to have to look at each other in a restaurant. Well, now one's looking at the TV, the other one's on their phone, or they're both on their phone, and nobody's connecting.
Hmm.
Even when you're watching TV in the same room, one's on their phone, they both might be on their phone. So they're physically there, but they're not. Plus, it used to be, I mean, with the cell phones now, your boss can reach you at any time.
Hmm.
So even if you're on vacation, you could be working or supposed to be working, or I need that report. Before you used to have a landline, and when you were in the yard raking leaves, you were out of touch.
Yeah.
So the work situation is scrunched everybody so much. You have all of these distractions. You got
Hmm.
pornography, you've got online dating and flirting and affairs, which is rampant. You've got people don't have time for each other. So unless they get proactive and swim against that current, because the system is built to push people apart, not on purpose, but there's just so much stuff. Get off
Yeah.
those phones.
Yeah.
Plan time to be together, because if you're going to wait until we have time, you're not going to find it.
Yeah.
Plus, you have the children issue. Kids have so many activities, that you
Mhm.
run from. If you have children, you run from one activity to another. I mean, I had this one couple, they had activities so busy that when they would drive and they had to pass the child from one car to the other, they pass them through the window so
Oh
they
wow.
could go, okay, go, you got to go, you're late. People don't eat dinner together. They don't sit and talk together. They eat dinner, they're in front of the TV or they're on their electronic stuff. There's no connection anymore.
Mhm.
Well, how do you expect to be a couple? So what happens is people end up being strangers, roommates, and then the kids grow older, and then it's like, oh, the kids that'll be moving on. Oh, I'm not so busy with them. They're driving themselves or they're busy with their friends. Wait a minute. Who are you? Wait a minute. I know you. Give me a minute. Oh, yeah, we got married 20 years ago. Yeah, now I remember. So what happens is They've evolved differently. They've handled the stresses in life differently. They've matured differently. And now they're strangers to each other. And that's a big breakup point. So they're either going to reinvent themselves or they're going to move on, usually, because, I'm just a different person than I was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And we didn't evolve together, cross-checking and growing together.
Right.
Because all those events prevented it, and we didn't get proactive and schedule time for us.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem that we never had before.
Yeah. No, I so agree. It's especially the going up current. You gotta fight for your marriage before things get bad, for sure. One thing you mentioned, setting time, making plans. I know you do a lot of, holistic work with how our bodies are breaking down if, whenever we're arguing and angry. So what are some of the, maybe, I don't know if you call them homework assignments or life changes that you would give? I think on your website, it also talked about even diet. So give us some examples. You've worked with a couple, let's say a couple weeks. What are some of the first things? Do you ask them to agree? Do you tell them this is what you need to do? What does that look like?
Yeah, so let's talk about my 5-step program. So right now, when people come in and they're arguing, and I'll say, listen, I used to give them that description that I just gave you, but now since I have this PowerPoint, I just said, I'm going to send you something. I'd like you to look at it. It's 50 minutes. I have a lot of graphics. See if you see yourself in that. And if you do, we will know exactly what to do in order to short circuit this immediately. All right. And I want you to look at it individually, because if they look at it together, they're going to argue about it. That's what you do. Exactly. No, you do that too. And that's not my purpose. My purpose is a focus and accountability. So let's say I give them that verbal description. You got front brain, back brain. You two have your back brain is highly wired now, and your front brain is kind of like a Pee Wee Herman. So we got to reverse it. We got to make your front brain the Terminator, and connecting self-control, accountability, responsibility. And we got to make the back brain Pee Wee Herman. We want to keep the back brain chained in the basement until you need it, like you're about to be run over by a car or mugged. But don't pull it out when your partner parks the car in the wrong place or puts the dishes on the wrong level in the dishwasher. Not time to nuke them. All right. You want a relationship afterwards. So they get it, and they'll come in and they'll say, yeah, I get it. I see that. That's us exactly. What do we do about it? Well, step one, ideally, you want to be able to talk through tense things, because you're going to have tense things, but and feel like you're understood and heard. But people don't have that ability when they're caught up in chronic arguing. They just bounce off the same wall over and over, and they never go through it. The same things keep recycling. So the first thing we want to do is my two parts of a relationship. I found there's the connecting part where we're enjoying time together, sharing, and we're getting closer. And then there's the work part, which is the communication / conflict resolution when issues come up. And they feed on each other. We're doing well, so we're going to argue less. We get along better, so we argue less. But when the arguing goes sour, we're arguing all the time. I was looking forward to going to dinner with you, but after that, what you said to me 2 minutes ago, I'm not enjoying dinner and I don't want to go to you. So now they slow up connecting, which means they're going to be shorter and more testy, which means they're going to argue more, which means they're going to do less positive. And now they're on this negative feedback loop that's going down. So I found the best way to short circuit that is cut the arguing. You got to hit the arguing face on, because if you give them an assignment, go out to a movie, and they're still hypersensitive to each other, they're going to argue the whole time. So you just made it worse. So my position is let's throttle this anger down ASAP, and then we can get you to start connecting, and then you'll be on a positive feedback loop. We're arguing less, we're enjoying each other more. So I feel better. So I'm arguing less. I'm less testy and short and giving you the benefit of the doubt. So we're getting along better. And now you're on a positive reinforcing loop. So what I'll do is I'll say, step one is be aware. Be aware when you're getting jacked up. Is your blood pressure getting up, raising, your muscles tensing? And before you throw that grenade, get away and get calmer. All right. So step one is be aware. Step two is put a pause switch in. Ideally, you want to get to the place where people can talk when they're tense, but they don't have that ability initially because their brain is wired for conflict and they don't have the self-control to do it. So as a skill, as an initial skill building step, I want you to be aware of when you're losing control. And before you say something, before you roll your eyes, get away before you drop that grenade. All right, so be aware, put a pause switch in, and step three, gets back to your question. Detox. Now you're upset. What are you going to do to get calmer? What does the science say? All right, calming music, comedy, touch. Touch releases endorphins. Endorphins calm those stress chemicals down. Getting involved in some kind of activity, going for a walk, gardening, playing with your dog, doing some meditation. So there's meditation tapes I'll give people. That's a good time to do it. You want to get calmer. Now that you're in your front brain and you can tell you're in your front brain, I can think straight. People will say, I feel calmer. I can laugh. Now you want to re-engage. All right. So good communication is not just get in touch with what you feel and vomit it on others. I call that vomit communication. That's conventional myth. There's no rhyme or reason. You just throw it out. And then you have all this debris that you have to deal with. So I call it controlled communication, filtered communication. Aristotle said anybody can become angry, even an idiot, but to be angry at the right place at the right time, that's my version of it. So I threw that in. Be angry at the right person at the right time for the right purpose in the right way is not so easy. So he says, I don't have a problem with anger, but make it constructive, filter it. Now, what you have in relationships, so you're calmer. Okay, so before we get on to the difference between fighters and flighters, emotive types and people who flee, they have an allergy to issues. We'll get back to that because that's a big problem. So now that you're calmer, now re-engage, but make sure they're calmer too, because if we both have to be in front brain, because let's resolve this, take responsibility and connect. But if I'm here and you're here, if you've noticed when the other party's upset, you're having a conversation, you can tell when they get hijacked because suddenly their logic goes out the window and they twist and distort everything you say. They seem to be looking for an argument. They mishear, misinterpret, bring up past issues, bring up toxic words. So they just been hijacked. There's one of the clear signs. Continuing communication at that point is just going to pull you in at some point, and now you're both going to be hijacked. And now you have what I call the escalation stage, and it's going to be nasty. That's the stuff people say and do that they frequently never forget or forgive. And you don't want to get there because it is real ugly and it's a relationship killer. Mm-hmm. The problem is when people get so wired where their backbrain is in control, they can't stop themselves. It's like a black hole, a vacuum that's sucking them in that. And they're like, no, I don't want to go there, but they can't stop themselves because front brain is so weak. It doesn't have the willpower to stop it. So they're getting caught up in that in spite of their desire to stop it. So this is an attempt to do that. Step one, be aware of when I'm getting jacked up and when you are. I can tell when I'm getting jacked up, my stomach starts twitching in a certain way that I know is not indigestion. I'm getting wired, but I can tell when my wife she's a lot more emotional than me. I can tell when she's getting jacked up because her eyes change, her whole countenance gets harsh, and her words change, and we're not connecting anymore, but she's out to get me and be right, which this brain has. Be right. And I got a 5-star wife, so I want to be everybody aware of that. She's a gem. But we all do that. I do the same thing. So what you want to do then is you want to get calmer. Now, Step 4 is now you want to communicate. And the big thing is, what do you do when the other party is been hijacked? They're upset and they're looking to provoke an argument, and everything you try just seems to make it worse. That's the real kicker. And I spent about 20 years figuring out, I'm like, what the heck is going on here? This doesn't make sense. Because think about this. Here you are, you're trying to talk through that. Now, like basically you're saying, listen, honey, stay calm. This is going to have real bad consequences. We're going on vacation. It'll ruin the vacation. Your family's coming over, and they seem immune to that and are just vomiting on you. And you know, and people think they can actually talk through that. See, here's one of the things we know from the science. You cannot talk. The science is clear. You cannot talk through back brain. Cannot be done. It's not made for talk. It's made for battle. It's made for conflict. It's a reciprocal brain. It seeks conflict in return. That's why when the person is upset, they're trying to provoke an argument. We're not doing that on purpose. We're doing it because we just been hijacked, and that's what it does. It's a Neanderthal in us. It's a beast. It's made for conflict. So you have this front brain. We try to talk through the other party. Now, let's be rational here. Make sense. All you're doing, it's like somebody that has an IQ of 69 and you're trying to teach them calculus. It's not going to happen. They don't have the brain capability to do that. So we try to put front brain into back brain, and all it does is trip us up. And then we get sucked in and end up saying and doing stuff we regret. We're saying we're not going to do it again. And then it happens over and over and over. And that's where the hopelessness comes in. No matter what we try, if we talk about it, we get into arguments. If we don't talk about it, they keep poking and poking and poking till we get into it anyway. We seem to be in a lose-lose situation. You know, you come home. Here's a great example. You come home, you have a great day, you open the door, and you know they're in back brain. How do you tell they're in back brain? They're giving you the evil eye. They're quiet. They're bringing up certain subjects that you know are taboo, or they have a certain tone to them. And you're like, Houston, we got a problem. I know where this is going. They're going to want to talk it through. Why they want to talk it through? Because that's what we've been teaching them for 40 years. Talk it through. And we'll go to bed mad at each other. Don't repress this. And they're going to want to talk it through. But I know from past experience, they don't want to talk it through to resolve it. They want to talk it through to get into an argument. However, if I don't talk it through with them, they're going to pick till we get into it anyway. So we're in a lose-lose situation no matter what I do. And furthermore, I feel guilty because I'm running from the problem, which is one of the things you're not supposed to do, is run from the problem. So either way, they're trapped, and it appears they're in a lose-lose situation. So that's what I talk about with step 5 is what's going on and what do you do about that? But before we go to that, I know we've got just a few minutes left. Let's talk about, one of the common ways couples will interact and present is you have somebody who's very, let's call them emotive. You have a fighter who tends to be emotional. And you have a flighter who tends to be avoidant. This is illogical, this is unproductive. And they seem to, it's like they have an allergy to conflict. So anytime the other party starts bringing it up, they're like, I'm out of here. And so the other party is like, I gotta nail them down, and they never come back. That's the problem. It's not like when they're calm and okay, honey, let's deal with this. It's gone. They sweep it under the rug. It makes the emotive type absolutely insane. You know, I got to talk this through. And if we don't talk it through now, you never talk about it. So I got to increase my talking in the hopes I can get something out of you. Because as soon as you leave that door, go through that door, it's done. You're never coming back to it. That's a really, really common pattern. So what I do with that is I get the person when they to disengage, but promise to come back and come back. And I throttle the emotive type back because that stuff is so intense. This party knows I can't talk through that because they twist everything into pretzels. Their temper's getting bad. They're whopping everything. So there's no point talking about it. So we got to throttle one down and throttle this one into that. And that, you know, that takes some tweaking, as you might imagine. So that's the goal. That's the goal.
Yeah.
And by the way, I tend to be the emotive type, so I know what they go through. And as we, but anyway, so what do you do with step 5? Step 5 is how do you navigate through? Remember, here's the scenario. You come into the house, they're upset, and you know they're going to want to talk it through. But if we talk it through, it's going to end up in an argument. And if I don't, they're not going to leave me alone till we talk it through. They're going to follow me into the next room. If I close the door, they're going to come in. If I lock the door, they're going to scream through the door. If I try to leave the house, they're going to block the door. That's amygdala hijack, by the way. That's that reptilian brain hijack. They want conflict. And the question then becomes, why won't they let you calm down? I mean, here you are, it's like you're saying, it's like you're trying to keep this thing from getting to a bad place, which we've been a dozen times before. It's a killer when we get there. You would think they would drop down on one knee and say, thank you, dear. Now I know why God put you in my life to keep me from going crazy like this and chilling our love. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That we have, everybody has that hope, but that has never happened in the, I know you froze up there for a minute. I was saying everybody has that hope that the other party's going to drop down on their knee and thank them because I talked sense into you. But it never happened in the history of the world and will never happen. What do they go in for the kill? Why? Because they've been hijacked. They're a crocodile at this point. They're looking to destroy, and you're the enemy. So what do you do with that situation? Actually, when you withdraw and they escalate, that's actually them going through withdrawal. It's like an addict going through withdrawal and they have more craving. So when you look at that scenario, if I say something, they get upset. And if I don't say anything, they get even more upset. That's actually the solution. They're actually going through withdrawal because the prey is escaping. Remember, when we get into this, I call this our crocodile brain. We're nothing more than alligators and crocodiles when this happens. We're just thinking of survival. The front brain that distinguishes us from the animals has clicked off. It's only got 25% blood flow, so it's comatose. So we in our primal state. So what do you do with that? So I talk to people about, that's what step 5 is. There's a number of ways to get through that. One of which is talking does not work. So let's be real clear about the science is clear. You cannot talk through a fight or flight response. So the more you try, the more they're going to twist, distort, and then pull you in to get the conflict that we all, including me, seek when we're in that place. We don't do it maliciously. It's just instinct. We're pure instinct at that point. So what do you do? So I say to people, can you go in when they're at that place? Can you go into the next room? 5% will say that'll work. The other 95% say, no, that won't work. Why not? They'll follow me in. Can you close the door? Another 5% say, oh, that'll work. Another 90% will say, no, that won't. They'll come in. Can you lock the door? Another 5% will say that'll work. The other 15, so you're up to 15%. And the other 85% say that won't work. Why? Because they'll get in their car, they'll ram it through the wall, and while I'm pinned in the rubble, they'll finish the argument.
Oh boy.
But not too much, because people will bang on the door, they'll scream on the door. Think about this. It's like an addict. You're depriving them of that adrenaline rush they're seeking, and that's why they're being so unreasonable. If you try to slip out the door, this isn't working, they're just screaming through the door, and they try to block you from leaving. If you manage to get out, they'll run behind the car. I've had women jump on the car and hold on to the windshield as the man is driving away through this real expensive neighborhood, making them all look like fools. So, men don't do that. What they'll do is they'll smash the windshields and dent the car. It's more macho. We wouldn't be hanging on the windshield. That's for women. That's for weak men. I'm real macho. I'll break the windows and dent the car on the one I'm paying, by the way. And now I have to pay the insurance deductible. So I got a dented car. But so people will, but you got to understand, why are they getting so intense on engaging? Because when we slip into our reptilian brain, we just see you as nothing more than a meal. And the meal is escaping. So you're cutting them off from their fix. So what do? You maintain that and don't give in, because if you go through that door, they'll like bait you back in. If you go through that door, it'll be all over and it'll be your fault, and you'll be divorced like that 5 times loser mother of yours. Oh, and you turn around, don't talk about my mother, and now they just hooked you, and they're getting their fix of conflict. But there's other things you can do, which I talk about in my step 5. Is you can give them a hug. I talk to a lot of couples where the woman might be the one who's losing it and the guy is the one who leaves, and it makes her crazy. And I'll say, if he gave you a hug right then, come here, honey, I need a hug. She'd say, I would love that. But what does that do? That releases touch. Releases, what does the science say? Releases oxytocin. We get flooded with that during sex. That's the bonding hormone, and our serotonin and all those hormones, they are like water on the stress hormones. Think about that. Here's a good example. You've been upset. You're really upset. You're really angry, and you have a good hearty laugh. And it's like it cleared the air. How did that happen? Because those connecting hormones are like water on the stress hormones. And that's what you want to do. That's why stage 3, when you detach and you detox, you want to release those hormones. What gives you pleasure? What calms you down? Flood the system with that and then re-engage. Because as long as you're disengaged and you're ruminating over these thoughts, remember, neuroplasticity, we are building more and more brain cells. The brain is a muscle. We are building this into a stronger and stronger control over us, more negativity, more dislike, more resentment, more anxiety, and so on. So all you're doing as you're pouting and sulking to punish them is making yourself a lot worse and sicker.
Right. Oh, wow. So many things on here to share. Thank you for giving us so much time and a lot of information, especially on some non-traditional methods. I'm so glad you shared those with us, and I hope they will be helpful to our listeners. So thank you for being here today,
Oh, my pleasure.
Dr. DeLuca. To our listeners, we're so thankful you joined us today. I hope you hear what was shared, and please leave us questions and comments, and tune in for future enlightening episodes as we explore the world of counseling.
One more thing.
Oh, sure. Yep.
One more plug.
Go ahead.
Go to my site. Listeners can go to my site, Go Beyond Talk Therapy. Contact me, and I will send you at no charge my course.
Okay, right? Awesome.
So you can do that with your couple. It's also on YouTube, I believe, but I'll send it. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them, because I'm here to help people.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.